Willkommen zurück zum Denkfest 2021 vom Ich zum Wir Teil 2 zusammenarbeiten. Und wir machen direkt weiter und da der nächste Vortrag und unser Gast englischsprachig ist, werde ich jetzt ins Englische wechseln. So welcome back after the coffee break here at Denkfest, and for our next topic, music for tribes through the self to the community, I'd like to welcome our speaker. Daniele Spada is a saxophonist, psychologist and neuroscientist, and he's a lecturer and researcher in psychology and neuroscience of music with teaching experience in Italy, Finland, and France. And he is currently focusing on the embodied music cognition, putting together movement and empathy, on special education for blind and deaf people, on cognitive and motor stimulation for people touched by dementia, and on rehabilitation. Welcome, Danilo.
Hello, Anna. Hello, everyone.
So your today's keynote is about the scientific perspective of the influence of music and dance on the brain and brain functions, and also on possibilities for therapies and chances for recovery after dementia. And before you start into your keynote, I would like to ask the people watching here at the live stream, you can ask your questions in the chat, also in German if you want to, and then later on we're going to do a little Q&A, and if necessary I'm going to translate. And so you can ask your questions, Sie können Ihre Fragen stellen über den Chat, die wir dann später noch aufnehmen. So far, enjoy the keynote, Music for Tribes Through the Self to the Community by Danilo Spada.
Thank you very much. What I'm going, okay, we can jump to the first slide. What are we going to do? I will try to give you a way in order to interpret it and understand how music could be useful on a side in order to understand ourselves on a side, and how music by consequence will give us opportunities in order to rehabilitate or stimulate heal persons. So next slide, please. It's kind of a journey. Okay, next again. So a first thing, it is quite strange to say let's study music, because next we can in fact study musical theory, solfeggio, instrumental technique, composition, orchestration, but next not I probably will not learn music. So next slide, please. From the phylogenetical point of view, that is the evolution of the species, of human species, we see musical instruments since always. For example, in this case, it's a flute we found in Germany, and dated 35,000 years ago. So it is somehow the melodic search is typically human, we could say. And next slide, if we look from the ontogenetical point of view, that is the development of the person, the very first steps we realize in our relation with the environment are based on, again, melody, let's say maybe prosody, we call it technically, we call the madres. Wow, what a beautiful child. Okay, it's the musical dimension of the language. So melody, on the other side, the bouncing, the movement, okay, and of course the eye locking. Next slide. And this is evident that what we that melody and movement is always present in our lives, and in particular in the context of the social and relations. And next slide, and this is also evident till seniors. Okay, so what is interesting is that in any way, we are always, when we speak about humans, we are always facing music. Next slide. And so why? If we think to music, to the central nervous system, sorry, we can make a distinction of three different subsystems. That is, the red one is the reptilian, what we call the reptilian system, that is necessary for survival, okay, for safety, personal safety. In yellow, what we call the limbic system is necessary in order to, is typical in mammals, okay? That is typical in the context of where the relations are needed, are essentials, okay? Mammals, we need to relate ourselves to the others. Okay, the limbic system is gives us this possibility through emotions. And the green, let's say, part, of course, it is not representative of the last part of the development. I mean, the crocodiles do have the neocortex, but what is new in humans is the frontal, so on the left, the frontal and prefrontal cortex, okay? And it is important to underline that in these last decades, the frontal and prefrontal cortex are severely touched by different kind of illness. Somehow we must ask ourselves why. Maybe the environment has something wrong with humans, maybe. So in any case, music is very interesting from the neuroscientific point of view because the musical experience stimulates all these three subsystems and simultaneously, synchronously. Okay, so next slide, please. This is absolutely evident when we play an instrument, but in fact, it is also interesting, evident when we just listen to music, okay? We have different brain areas of the cortex, neocortex, who do play together, let's say, okay? Kind of an orchestration. And the next slide, please. And this is particularly evident in dance. In this case, for example, on the left, you see the organization and the network needed in order to organize the beginning of a movement. Okay, and on the right, there is the activation of the network that comes immediately by consequence. That is the kind of a game of control of the center of gravity, okay? But the interesting thing is that this loop, this network, depends on the musical tempo. So this is one of the reasons for which music is so useful in rehabilitation or anyway in stimulating persons, for example, let's think to the Parkinson's disease. So next slide, please. Let's think to the central nervous system as an orchestra, okay? Perfect, thank you. Our journey will begin through the social dimension. Next, please. What is absolutely clear is that if we look to the phylogenetically, so the development, the evolution of the human species, we I told you, we find a lot of musical instruments, but in this case, we go deeper. The musical experience is typically social. So we typically think to music in our ancestors through. Is it possible to have the multimedia contribution? Perfect, thank you. So what are we assisting to? Of course, we are moving we as a mirror system. We will speak about this briefly later, but we are dancing in circle. This is extremely important. Any kind of experience, any kind of experience in tribes is realized in circles. And we are moving together in circle on rhythm and somehow kind of melody, okay? This is important also from the anthropological point of view, because if we think to our first steps, in which the single person is not so important. What is important is the group, the tribe, okay? We choose together because we need to stay together. So next slide. If we, thank you. If we take this approach, we pay attention to this kind of behavior, what we clearly know today is that the experience of playing together some rhythm, okay, is extremely useful in order to facilitate the synchronization on a side, and on the other side, it is extremely useful in order to reinforce the social dimension of the persons. We know, for example, that if a child play together with a person, the social condition you see at the top, he will synchronize better on a side, and in particular, he will socialize with that person, okay? And this is not true from the synchronization point of view, of course, because it is a machine in the audiovisual condition, so in the middle. I see and listen to a machine who is playing, tapping some rhythm, but okay, I will follow the rhythm, I will synchronize somehow, but not as in a good way as with a social condition. So next slide. If this is evident from the socialization, from the point of view of socialization, it is also evident that the rhythm is effective in order to stimulate our brain, even if I do not move. On the right, we see the PMC is the premotor cortex and SMA is the supplementary motor area that are activated, let's say, while tapping. Okay, so the subject is asked to tap on a rhythm, and we see those activations. But what is interesting is that if I do not ask any kind, give any kind of task to the person just to listen to music, we see again the motor areas that are active. Okay, so it doesn't matter, just listening to music force my brain to move. Okay. So next slide, there is another aspect that in this case is strongly linked to the emotional, to the limbic system, okay? So the yellow, the social subsystem of the brain. And it is the distinction between emotional and cognitive empathy. In a study we did about 10 years ago, focusing on quartets, okay? So it is strange because when we play together in quartets, we do not have a director. So how can we synchronize so precisely? And in particular, when we begin playing together, okay? Silence and we begin together precisely. So it is amazing from the neuroscientific point of view. Of course, it is before amazing from the emotive point of view. I mean, it's music. But what the difference, and very interesting difference, is that on the left, the emotional, what we can call emotional empathy, is typical from any primates. So of course in humans too. When we look someone doing something, for example, drinking a glass of water, my brain will imitate, okay, what he's looking to. The next step that is typically human is the cognitive empathy. I mean, if I see someone feeling bad, for example, I will feel bad. But in the cognitive context, I will feel also the reasons for which the person is feeling bad. Okay, so it is very interesting. And I underline the fact that, again, the cognitive empathy is on the front and prefrontal cortex. Okay, we see it in the front. This is the front part of the brain. So, strange thing, we are in these decades assisting to a degeneration of this part of the brain very often. So let's think about this. Next slide, please. So next step. If we see that music, rhythm, melody is extremely important, and we see it in the very first step of the evolution of the human species, we also see in the musical experience that is quite recent. I mean, not 30 and 40 thousands of years ago, but about a couple, and in particular 1,000 years ago in the medieval ages. We can assist in the musical experience to a kind of a jump inside the person, and not in the group of person, but inside of us. Next, and please, if you can play the multimedia file. Perfect, thank you. So we are assisting to a very important changement in the musical experience. That is, let's look inside us. Hildegard von Bingen is a great person and also a great composer. I suggest you to look for her. Next slide, please. And if we look inside of us and we ask, who am I? Okay. The intention in the Gregorian music was look inside of you and make kind of a jump in order to look for God. Okay. But let's look inside of us first. And Descartes 600 years later, told us, okay, let's synthesize cogito ergo sum. So I think, then I am. Okay, I feel myself by consequence of my thinking. Okay, my thoughts. This is also true and effective, let's say, today through the psychology, and on the other side, the cognitive neuroscience, with a difference that is, it's not just a kind of a matter of thinking, but it is also a matter of neurophysiological behavior. So we put together in the cognitive neuroscience the mind and the brain, okay, and we look together their own behaviors and understand very important thing about our central nervous system. But there is another step that is really precious. And the next slide, please. That is proprioception. We cannot imagine the self without proprioception and without the body. Okay, this is extremely important. So, next slide, please. This is my first pilot experience I did looking for the behavior of a person when they feel the sonification of movement, the experience of movement. In this context, there is a child who is imitating some movements, and by consequence of his own movements, there are sounds. And this was really, to me, this was a very important experience, because I understood that this is a very useful way in order to stimulate patients. Okay, from there, I began to work on that from the clinical point of view. Okay, next slide, please. But let's imagine there is, so we are looking in what we call the embodied cognition. Okay, what about we always look at or to or for something, but there is always, we always use the eyes. Okay, when we do not have the possibility to use the eyes, and this is the case of this child, we have we are forced to make a representation of the reality. Okay, and this is really important, because also the blind person will try to organize a representation of himself from the inside of the body. And when he touches the environment, he will feel by consequence a huge quantity of stimulus, okay, about his own person. Okay, next slide. I suggest you to try and touch the environment with your eyes. Okay, in this case, we are looking at some frequencies and harmonics. On the left, the two frequencies on the black background are sounds. Okay, they are so a note made with a violin and a flute. And what is interesting in this context is that you can see that the same note, but a different wave. So those little waves that compose a big wave are the harmonics. Okay, so we can say that in the violin we can find far more harmonics than in the flute. This does not mean, please, that violin is better than the flute. Okay, it is just a matter of a different timbre. Okay, same note, and maybe the same. Somehow I would say that the violin is really stronger if it is not on tune. It is quite bad. So anyway, but on the right, we again see these waves, but in this context, it's an electrode recording a piece of a cortex of my brain. And we are, of course, again, looking at big waves. Somehow you can imagine big waves and little components. Okay, next slide, please. And in this case, at the top, you see the original signal, and lower from the bottom, we are looking to the different components, the different band, okay, of harmonics. The first, the second, okay, the first is life of the central nervous system. The second, in the second line, we are facing to the deep sleep. Okay, when we sleep deeply, and we find this kind of electrical behavior. The third line is alpha. Let's imagine if you close your eyes and relax and breathe slowly. Okay, you will jump in. It's a matter of seconds, 2 3 seconds. We will jump in alpha. Okay, beta, that are I do not see. I hope you see better than me. But anyway, beta is the electrical behavior of our brain now. Okay, we are listening to someone who is speaking, maybe telling us something interesting about music and the brain and so on. Okay, and I remember that, etc., memory, emotions, and so on. So this is beta. Okay, our daily life behavior of the brain. And at the top of the first components is gamma. Let's think to gamma. So the highest harmonics we are looking to, they are the creativity, okay, the problem solving, and so on. So what is important is that, for example, problem solving. I have a problem, I need to solve a difficulty, and so I spend all the afternoon in order to find the solution, but no way I can't. So in the evening, I go to bed, I lie down, switch off the light, and pling, the idea, okay, I got the solution. Unfortunately, the morning later, I will forget it. So, but this is important because what did happen there? The idea is that when I stay in beta, we need to go down in alpha in order to jump in gamma and be creative. So we cannot jump in gamma while always thinking. Okay, we need to relax. Next slide, please. And this is clearly evident when we play chess, that are spatial-temporal abilities. We need time, and we need to move in the space. These are gamma. Okay, the highest cognitive functions. Okay, we see in super player, but next slide, we typically see this behavior in musicians at in any context, also in children. Okay, and this is interesting for the neuroscience, for a little part of the community, neuroscientific community. And the next slide is that the same thing, we find the same thing, next slide, please, in meditation. Okay, so this is really precious. If we want that our brain dance and work in a creative way, let's go down and to alpha, slow down, and then be creative. So next slide. From tribes, the collective, let's say, musical experience, okay, we share everything. We need to look for us, and this is the Gregorian melody, for example, okay? And now we are again facing to this situation. Today, we are extremely in a culture that is extremely individualist. Okay, so maybe we need to resolve this question and go further to the community dimension. So next slide, please, and the musical contribution. Thank you. So somehow it is no, please back to the thank you. This is a synthesis. If we want, we are in circle. There is music. We are somehow dancing and moving on music, but we close the circle. In this case, for example, thanks to the thoughts that are the composer is communicating us. Okay, I of course choose the hymn to joy for clear reasons, but this is a very important aspect. So next slide now. Thank you. What we are doing in these years, since 2 years, we are working in 2 different European projects, in Brain Art on a side and City for Care on the other. We are working on music. We can jump to the next slide. So we are going to the end. And what we are doing in there, we are first of all trying to stimulate the community through different experiences. Drum City, Tango City, you can imagine. The Sentieri del Terzo Paradiso means an experience of walking on mountains. The Lecco is on the lakes, and we have in there they have very beautiful mountains, well known in the world. And so we stimulate persons to move. We need to move. This is extremely important, in particular in these months, okay? Since a year, we need to walk, at least physiologically. For physiological reasons, we need to walk half an hour at least per day without stopping, okay? Just walk, okay, for half an hour. And given our cardiovascular system, our brain need to be oxygenated. So in those 2 different projects, the one is looking to the degenerative diseases in dementia, and in particular the dementia of the Alzheimer's type. And on the other side, we are working on the rehabilitation of patients touched by stroke, both for the upper and the lower arms and legs. And of course, we are working on ecological, let's say, way of developing technology. Okay, so next step, please. So the idea is linked to the necessity. Tribes, a group where the individual was quite indistinct. The necessity to look deeper inside ourselves. This is the self, the experience of I am in a group, okay? And then now we need to somehow go back, but in fact close the circle. We will not lose our identity, but we need to reorganize a way of being in community. And what is interesting is that music gives us a solution, okay? Our projects are based on the widespread community of care. I mean that each of us, we need each of us. I do not, of course, I need a doctor in order to, if I bless myself, for example, I don't know, but I need you, any one of you, in order, and I will need you feel good in order to give myself the possibility to feel good too. If you do not feel good, I will not be able to feel good. It will not possible. We are, as humans, we are social animals. So we must get back there. And okay, I took my, okay, just the last slide in order to give you the idea. This is in Lima. They are dancing. Of course, we will be able to dance again together. And it's just a matter of, let's be patient for a while. But okay, so thank you for your attention. And I am at your disposition if there are any questions.
Well, yeah, Danilo Spada, thank you very much for your great keynote. It was really interesting to learn about how the brain is functioning, but also how it comes together with the topic of this year's Denkfest, to talk about the self, the I, but also talk about the we, the community, the tribe. So thank you very much for this input into your work. As you said, we are open for questions. You can ask your questions via the chat. Sie können Ihre Fragen gerne im Chat stellen, die wir dann gerne beantworten. So what I would like to ask you, if you could give us, you already kind of touched the topic, but maybe you can give us a little more insight into the two projects. You also have the Brain Art project and the City of Care. These are two concrete projects you are working on. Maybe you can give us a brief overview on those topics.
Yes, thank you for the question. On a side, the Brain Art project, in theory, we should the end of the Brain Art should be now. But of course, because it is focusing on the Alzheimer's disease in particular, from the experimental point of view in particular, and as you can imagine, for 1 year, it was not possible at all to make any kind of experience with them, with the residents in the what we call in Italy nuclei Alzheimer. So the residents were completely isolated, so we have the opportunity and the possibility to go forward till the next year, so we can recuperate somehow the experience. In that case, from the experimental point of view, we are looking for solutions in order to give the patients the possibility to play. So we are in the domain of what we call the serious game. On a side, through a tablet, a big table, let's say, a digital table, they four person together as the have the possibility to play, for example, in rhythmical games. Of course, from the neuroscientific point of view, the need is to stimulate the cognitive abilities and the synchronization. I told you how important is synchronize rhythmically. Okay, so and and this is the case of the table. It's a touchscreen table, okay, and in which we developed a series of games. On the other side, there is a far more ecological experience we are suggesting to the persons, and it is an experience that I had the chance to realize, let's say, in French in the last 3 years. That is the experience in French, the Caravane de la Mémoire, in which we propose to the residents, Alzheimer's patients, to dance, in particular dance tango. So what I am doing is to I am evaluating the usefulness of such an experience, both from the social point of view, let's say, because we dance together, and they can dance together finally now. And on the other side, there is a more deep motor interest. That is, we are looking for ways in order to avoid the shoot of a person, okay? Because we must avoid that the person break his own bones. So a good stimulation dance could be, and tango in particular is interesting because of this reason. What I'm doing in that context is that while they are experiencing this atelier of tango, we are recording the motor behaviors, and through accelerometer and gyroscopes on the feet of the person, we are looking for changement, and it seems it's a good solution. These are the preliminary, finally, data we are getting. This is brain art. On the other side, City for Care is an experience that is focusing on the social attention of care. And from the clinical point of view, we are working together with the hospitals, and in particular the hospital of Lecco and Bellano. There are two cities, a city and a village on the lake of Como. We are working with the acute phase of a stroke, and in order to stimulate the fine movement, okay, so hands and fingers. On the other side, there is a form of a stimulation of motor stimulation of the gross motor system, so walking. But in both cases, we developed two different serious games that sonify the movement. On one side, it's a keyboard, but that plays in a quite amazing different ways. And on the other side, it's a kind of stimulation of dancing exercises, but sonified. And this appears to be a useful way of stimulation, let's see. But what is important in the City for Care project is that in this case, and it is more recent, we began last winter, we are focusing on way of sensibilization on a side and of activation of the community, okay? Because the community needs its own relation inside. We feel good. Let's imagine I'm walking on a road, and I will never get someone who tell me, hello, have a good day, okay? But probably, hopefully, I will get such an augurio on mountains, Okay, hey, have a good day. Okay, you too. But we are so tired. It is interesting, but we need to be tired. We need to be in trouble in order to look for social dynamics. Okay, so what we are doing is that we are looking for ecological, natural, simple solutions in order to motivate a community to regain the motivation of their own relation, because the well-being comes from there. Okay, so in extrema synthesis.
Yeah, thank you very much. It feels like these are really big projects with lots of different topics to talk on, and we can talk for hours on the different projects. However,
Yes.
thank you very much for your overview on your interdisciplinary work, which is the collaboration we are looking for in itself. And it's really great to learn about the different aspects of your work, about the music aspect, but also the neuroscientific aspect and also the psychological aspect being attached to it. So, Danilo Spada, thank you very much for letting us be part of your work today on music for tribes through the self and to the community. Thank you very much for joining us today at Denkfest.
Thank you to you too, to anyone.
Thank
And
you.
let's dance a little, move on music, please, each one.
Right, we are looking for this after the pandemic has ended to get together as a community again and dance together as we saw from the picture in Lima. I think everybody's looking very much forward to this.
Yes, I see.
Thank you very much. Goodbye, Danilo.
Bye, bye, bye. Ciao, Anna. Ciao.
Bye. So, und wir machen weiter um 16 Uhr mit dem Thema Serious Games, was gerade auch schon teilweise angesprochen wurde, die besondere Herausforderungen, die Serious Games haben. Und ich freue mich, dass Professor Dr. Linda Breitlauch dann eine kleine Keynote zu dem Thema hält. Um 16 Uhr geht es hier weiter mit dem Thema Serious Games. Bis dahin, auf Wiedersehen.